Now, most people have days when they come to work with worries, hangovers, or distractions. Those are times for being doubly cautious. When the body's on the job, but the mind is elsewhere, it's danger time.
Why would anyone find comfort in staying broken? This very notion feels contradictory. Isn't the human spirit hardwired for wholeness, for growth, for joy? And yet, there is a peculiar stillness that settles in sorrow, a deceptive calm that takes root in pain we've carried too long. We call it suffering, but sometimes we cradle it like a friend. There are those who spend years in the quiet company of their own despair, not because they lack the will to heal, but because the wound has become familiar. The pain has carved out a space inside them, and now it feels like home. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's in the routines we no longer question, the roles we no longer challenge, the inner dialogue we no longer interrupt. The discomfort we know becomes more tolerable than the uncertainty we don't. We choose what's familiar, not because it nurtures us, but because it doesn't surprise us. But what if this comfort isn't comfort at all? What if it's a disguise, a cage painted to look like a sanctuary? Brokenness doesn't just hurt, it holds us. But if we're willing to look closely, not just at the wound, but at the way we cling to it, something begins to shift. In this exploration, we'll move through 3 layers. First, we'll look at why we sometimes find comfort in staying broken, the emotional pull of pain, and why it feels safer than freedom. Then, we'll uncover the deeper patterns behind this tendency through the lens of ancient scripture, esoteric traditions, philosophy, and psychology. And finally, we'll trace a way forward, a map, not toward perfection, but toward movement, toward the kind of change that doesn't just fix what's broken, but reshapes who we are. Because the more we understand this pattern, the more we realize we were never meant to stay here. Pain is part of the path, but it was never meant to be the destination.
Ultimately, you will end up wherever is acceptable to you. You will get out of life whatever is acceptable to you.
On the surface, it seems illogical. Why would anyone choose to remain in pain? The instinct to survive, to improve, to seek pleasure over suffering. These are supposed to be fundamental to human nature, and yet, so often, we find ourselves lingering in emotional wounds long after the moment that caused them has passed. Not because we enjoy them, but because they've become familiar. They've rooted themselves into our inner landscape, not as foreign invaders, but as something resembling home. To stay broken is not to fail, it is to find safety in the known. Pain, after all, is predictable. We know how it feels. We know the thoughts it conjures, the beliefs it reinforces, the roles it allows us to play. There is a kind of ease in returning to the same dark room each night, because at least we don't have to learn our way through new hallways. The mind chooses what is familiar, even if it is cruel, over the unknown, even if it promises peace. We cling to our wounds, not always because we want to, but because healing asks us to become unfamiliar with ourselves. It threatens the identity we've built around the pain. And the truth is, many of us would rather feel known in our suffering than risk being lost in our healing. But often, the pull to stay broken isn't about pain itself, it's about predictability. Familiar suffering can feel safer than unfamiliar freedom. We know how this pain behaves, we've memorized its edges, and even if it hurts, it doesn't surprise us. There's a reason the old saying persists: better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Psychologists note that people often choose familiar struggles over uncertain change, not because they want to suffer, but because the unknown feels more threatening than what they've already survived. In psychoanalytic terms, we unconsciously return to the most familiar experiences, even when they limit us. We assume the unknown might be worse, so we stay with the pain we recognize, not because it's good, but because at least we understand it. Brokenness, over time, can become a kind of identity. When the story we've told ourselves is one of struggle, suffering begins to shape the mirror. This is just who I am, we say. a damaged person, a lost cause. There's a strange comfort in that resignation. It sets limits on what the world can expect from us and what we expect from ourselves. For some, that identity is reinforced by care, attention, sympathy. When we've spent years being supported in our pain, the idea of healing can feel distant. What happens if I get better and no one sees me anymore? Who will I be if I'm no longer the one who's hurting? So we stay in character, not out of weakness, but out of attachment, because if the pain leaves, a part of us goes with it. When pain becomes consistent, it can teach us something dangerous, that effort is pointless. This is what psychologists call learned helplessness, a state where the mind, after facing repeated trauma or failure, begins to believe it has no power left. It's not just a thought, it's a deep resignation, where even when doors open, we no longer reach for them. We assume they'll shut before we arrive. In classic experiments, animals exposed to inescapable shocks eventually stopped trying to flee, even when escape became possible. Humans are no different. After enough disappointment, we stop believing in the possibility of change, and strangely, that hopelessness can begin to feel like comfort, because if there's nothing we can do, there's nothing we're responsible for. Why try becomes a shield. This is just my fate becomes a sedative. We begin to find relief in the idea that we no longer need to act. The weight of agency lifts, and what remains is a dull, stagnant sorrow, a sorrow that asks nothing from us, and in doing so, convinces us to stay. The body, like the mind, adapts to repetition. When sadness, stress, or fear become chronic, our nervous system adjusts. Hormones are released, neural pathways deepen, and over time, the body begins to expect the state of suffering. It becomes the new baseline. The storm, once temporary, becomes the climate. There are theories in neuroscience that suggest we can become addicted to these emotional states, not consciously, but biologically. The stress response, the numbing chemicals of depression, the familiar tension of anxiety, they start to feel normal. And when peace arrives, the body doesn't always welcome it. It rejects it. Calm feels unfamiliar. Joy feels unsafe. The nervous system sounds the alarm, not because something is wrong, but because something is different. This is how we end up recreating the pain we say we want to escape. We stir conflict. We withdraw. We sabotage peace, not out of malice or choice, but because the body has mistaken suffering for stability. And in that confusion, we find ourselves returning again and again to what hurts, simply because it's what we've learned to feel at home in. The Shawshank Redemption is a story about life inside a prison and the psychological effects of long-term confinement. It explores how people adapt to captivity, sometimes to the point of fearing freedom itself. Brooks, a character in the movie, is released after spending 50 years behind prison walls. It should have been a triumph, freedom after a lifetime in captivity.
I can't believe how fast things move on the outside. I have trouble sleeping at night. I have bad dreams like I'm falling. I'm tired of being afraid all the time.
But the outside world was too vast, and eventually, he chooses to leave it altogether.
The man's been in here 50 years, Hayward. 50 years. This is all he knows. In here, he's an important man. He's an educated man. Outside, he's nothing. But I'm telling you, these walls are funny. First you hate them, and you get used to them. Enough time passes, you get so you depend on them.
We too learn to depend on our own walls, the ones built from heartbreak, fear, failure, years spent inside cycles that shrink our spirit until the idea of wholeness becomes terrifying. We stop resisting the pain, then we start adjusting to it, and before long, we can't imagine ourselves without it. This is the strange comfort of staying broken, not because it heals us, but because the world outside our wounds feels too uncertain to trust. By now the pattern is clear. We don't just suffer, we adapt to suffering. We find strange comfort in it. We wrap our pain in meaning and call it identity. But once we've seen this pattern for what it is, the next question is why? Why do we cling to what wounds us? What we'll explore next is not a solution, but a series of mirrors, reflections offered by religion, philosophy, and science. Different languages, same truth. Because if we can understand the architecture of our suffering, we can begin to redesign it. And in doing so, we might finally find a way out. Throughout history, storytellers and sages have noted that humans sometimes resist salvation or stay attached to their chains. An example from the Bible is the story of the Israelites after they escaped slavery in Egypt. One would think they'd eagerly embrace freedom, but in the wilderness, they grew afraid and nostalgic for their old life. They complained to Moses that in Egypt, at least, we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, and begged to go back to bondage in Egypt. They were physically free, but emotionally still chained to the familiarity of servitude. Freedom's uncertainty, the open desert, an unknown promised land, was so frightening that slavery started to look comfortable by comparison. This dramatic story highlights a truth. People can become so accustomed to their suffering that they prefer it to the fear of the unknown. It's an ancient illustration of finding strange comfort in a painful status quo. In the Quran, there is a verse that proclaims, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. This emphasizes personal agency, that one must decide to step out of their old state, but it also implicitly acknowledges that people often stay in the same condition until they make that difficult internal shift. In other words, divine help comes when we choose change over comfortable stagnation. The verse suggests that staying broken, or in any unwanted state, is easy. Changing it requires conscious will from within. Many religious frameworks, whether explicitly or through parables, teach that transformation is a choice. Stories, after all, are just truths wearing different names. Where the Quran speaks of internal change, Greek mythology warns of its absence. In the tale of Ulysses and the Lotus Eaters, we encounter a different kind of prison, not one built of pain, but of pleasure. The crew stumbles upon a land where the lotus fruit clouds the mind and dulls the will. Those who eat it forget their purpose, they forget their home, they lose the fire that once drove them forward. Ulysses must drag his men back to the ship, away from comfort, back into struggle, because left alone, they would have stayed, quietly erasing themselves in the sweetness of stagnation. Though it seems the opposite of pain, this too is a form of brokenness, a state so effortless it demands nothing from us. No growth, no conflict, no self-examination, just the slow fade of identity into numbness. And whether it is the ache of trauma or the ease of oblivion, the danger is the same. We are lulled into stillness, into forgetting that we are meant to move, to change, to become. Nietzsche once wrote, "To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. It is a call, not to escape pain, but to transmute it, to pull something sacred from the wound. But meaning is not easily found. It demands endurance, reflection, and the willingness to reframe what once broke us. And for those who cannot, or do not, find that meaning, a different pattern often emerges. They settle into the rhythm of suffering itself. It becomes routine." Psychologists categorize attachment styles often as secure or insecure. If someone developed an anxious attachment, meaning they found relationships in childhood to be inconsistent or painful, they might actually feel at home with anxiety in their adult relationships. A securely loving, stable partner might feel uncomfortable, whereas an unreliable or dramatic partner feels oddly right. The attachment to pain comes from early programming. We seek what our brain knows. Similarly, a person with low self-worth might date people who treat them poorly because it confirms their ingrained beliefs about themselves, and as twisted as it is, having those beliefs confirmed is comfortable in its certainty. The uncertainty of being treated well and having to adjust one's self-view is scarier. This is often referred to as a comfort zone of dysfunction. The person is literally comfortable only when things are dysfunctional to a degree they recognize. Taken together, modern psychology reveals what ancient wisdom intuited long ago, that the comfort of brokenness is rarely random. It is built, brick by brick, through conditioning, identity, fear, and biology. We form attachments not only to people, but to patterns, to emotional baselines, to the familiar terrain of pain. And once established, these inner structures resist demolition. Even healing, if it feels unfamiliar, can register as a threat. A new reality, free of the suffering we've come to expect, forces us to let go of the roles we've played, the stories we've told, the armor we've worn, and so we resist not just what hurts us, but what could free us. So then the question emerges, how do we break this pattern? How do we choose freedom when fear makes suffering feel like home? The good news is this: patterns, once seen clearly, begin to lose their grip. Recognition is the first disruption. And though the roots may run deep, they are not permanent. They are not who you are. They are who you've learned to be. And anything learned can be unlearned. This work is not easy. It asks us to step outside our comfort zones, to challenge the very beliefs that once protected us. But human beings are astonishingly capable of transformation when intention meets awareness. The same mind that once clung to suffering can be taught to reach for something greater. But reaching requires more than willpower. It requires a map, a structured, honest framework to navigate what's been buried under years of habit, identity, and survival. What you see here is a structured prompt, a guided conversation you can have with AI to uncover uncover the patterns keeping you stuck. It helps you explore where your comfort in brokenness began, what purpose it's been serving, and what you'll need to let go of to move forward. It helps you slow down, examine your beliefs, and create a real plan for change, step by step, question by question. If you're willing to be honest, this conversation can show you where you've been, and more importantly, where you could go. Want to try it for yourself? The full prompt is in the description below. Breaking the strange comfort of staying broken is a quiet act of courage. It's the hero's journey, leaving behind what's familiar and stepping into the unknown. You battle old beliefs, face the fear of change, and emerge transformed. You are the author of your life, and if you've been writing the same chapter on repeat, then this is your moment to begin again. Healing is not a myth. People do change, hearts do mend, whole lives have been rebuilt from places far darker than this. The world is full of reminders. The phoenix rises from ashes, the butterfly emerges from complete dissolution, and in Kintsugi, broken pottery is repaired with gold. In the end, the strange comfort of staying broken is just that. Strange, a hollow stand-in for the deeper peace that only healing can offer. Choosing to trade that false safety for true transformation is one of the bravest decisions you'll ever make. As Viktor Frankl wrote, when we cannot change a painful past, we are challenged to change ourselves, and in doing so, we shape a new future. From the cocoon of brokenness, something beautiful can emerge. Not a return to who you were, but a becoming into someone whole, free, and fully alive. Your future self is waiting, just on the other side of that comfort zone. If something resonated with you, or if you have questions, let me know in the comments.